Okay, rulers, settle down. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get singles for all your Force of Will and other trading card games, as well as these amazing patrons. Thank you for your support. Class is in session. Hey there, rulers. Welcome back after a long week of Force of Will to office hours. It is, we know you probably have some questions, especially with seeing all these new assignments and new things that you just got given this week with the wonderful new rulers, so we're here to help. As always, I am DM173, and I am joined by the magnificent Mike Rance.
Hello, friends. Jeremy, you're really selling the whole teacher thing.
Yeah, and the perfect Paul Reisman.
Perfect.
Wow.
Perfect!
Jeez.
As always, do want to go ahead and do a little bit of stuff as we get started here. Just a reminder that we are sponsored by Odyssey Games, and if you're looking to get your boxes of Magic Stone War Zero, especially now that you're all hyped seeing the new rulers, you can click the link in the description to go get your pre-orders. They still have them for $85 a box, and I think they're working on getting a couple more pre-release kits. Don't quote me on that. They might have already sold out if they got more, but they are working on getting some more, so check that out. For our friends who are over on Facebook watching the stream as well, hello! We're glad that you're here. If you want to get some more access or be able to interact with us a little bit better, I encourage you to come on over to YouTube. For those of you who are on YouTube and you like what we're doing and you want to consider supporting the channel, you can listen to Kiki in the chat and consider clicking that join button down below to get access to join us as a member, which gets you access to the emotes, membership, and all kinds of other cool stuff, and goes to directly support the channel financially, which we're very appreciative of. Now, one more thing. If you're looking to make some money playing some card games this weekend, go ahead and check out the link for the Minnesota Games and Geek 1.5K webcam tournament. You can get signed up straight to there. We just want to make sure that as many people sign up for that as possible. And if you can't play, let us know, because we are going to be streaming it here on the channel this weekend. Whew. So, with that, you got some new rulers. You guys ready to talk about some new rulers?
Yes.
Tag, you're it.
Oh, jeez. All right. I'm it now? Who's it? Wait.
So,
No,
we're going to talk about...
We're
We're going to jump right in with Amerius here, and specifically we're going to talk about this new mechanic that has been brought to us called Tag, before we get anything into anything else. So, all of the 6 stages have this concept. It's called Tag, where if you have a ruler that is... 2 rulers that have the same tag keyword, tag 6 sages in this case, you can start with both of them in the game. So that means you get all of their benefit, and the things that we have been told is 1, you can call for stone with 1 and use the tap ability of the other. 2, you can call stone with 1 and judgment with the other at the same turn. And 3, you get all of the effects of both rulers at the start of the game. And then you can mix and match however you want. So, with that out of the way, first impressions on the concept of tag as a whole before we go into each of the individual rulers.
I think it's
Epic
a very,
story.
very... Oh, go ahead, Paul.
I was going to just say, it's a really epic story for New Frontiers. The fact that we're here. Haha. Okay, tag out.
All right, cool.
How many memes?
I'm in.
How many memes?
Anyway, all the memes. No, I'm a pretty big fan of the tag mechanic, honestly. I really like the fact that they're kind of exploring new territories at this point, because we've never really seen this done outside of fan formats.
Sure.
Which is nice, because it either means A, there's a really good coincidence, or B, somebody at the company is watching what fan formats are doing.
Right.
I'd like to think of the second one, but here's where my believability level there.
I think
so.
I think for me, it's a really good encouragement for 2 ways. It's a really good way to push a 110 card set further, because suddenly, now obviously the 7th ruler, Wolfgang, he stands by himself, and we'll talk about that when we get to him, but these 6 rulers have their own little mini support suites. Normally when we have rulers, each ruler has a very clearly defined support suite that comes with them, and they don't really blend together super well. But in this sense, what we would hope is that these support suites are very much interchangeable and play off of each other very well, which creates the opportunity for this set to go further in terms of experience. because no two combinations are going to feel the same, but also no two combinations are going to be unplayable, would be the hope, right? Which suddenly, I joked around when we saw this, is like, cool, it's a 7 ruler set. Technically, it's a 22 ruler set, which gives you a lot of like how much you can play around with it. I say 22 because you can play each of the rulers individually, the 6 sages individually, which is good for the hey, me and a friend just bought a box and want to try the game out concept. But really, obviously, if you're playing competitive, you want to get to 2 6 sages. Overall, I think, though, very, very cool. Encourages judgment without like feeling out of place tempo-wise, which can be one of the reasons. Like, there are people who build decks and judgments just like an afterthought. Like, I guess if I have nothing else, I'll just judgment. So I think that these rulers also do a good sense of encouraging you to judgment, which is very cool. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a very, very fun, varied, fresh experience.
Yep. I think the only thing I would say is like the issue that I have with it. I do wish that there were more either restrictions on playing the 2 rules at the same time, or like a benefit for playing them alone. Because it feels like, you would kind of want to experiment with those extra 6 permutations out of the game.
Oh, sure.
And it doesn't feel like there's much benefit to trying out like a solo Featsing deck or a solo Monos deck.
For sure.
I would have liked that a little bit. I would have liked some kind of like, little extra push there. But I appreciate the design for what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like Rift Reward.
So with that, Paul, do you have any last thoughts about Tag before we jump into our first ruler here?
I think all I was gonna say is it's interesting how this is gonna make our Ataractia's Memoria more playable than it was like last set. But it's interesting to me how the design team is sort of creating these rulers in such a way that they're like, we want you to interchange with them and we want you to be thinking about them in complex ways. When I first saw them starting to change the way they were building sets back in New Valhalla, I had no idea we were ever going to get to this point. So the fact that we're even here right now, I'm much more excited for this set than I would have been otherwise.
Yeah, for sure.
Knowing that these rulers are interactable in a very unique way, which respects the lore as well.
Yeah. So 2 things before we get into this again. First off, it has been confirmed by the company that we are getting 2 rulers per box, which is great. Second, for Grey Grumbler, you said the link is broken for the Ruler School playmat. If you just go to inkedgaming.com and search Ruler School, you should find the mat, provided they're still hosting it. I haven't checked in a while, if I'm being perfectly honest. But that's a way for you to be able to get it. So, Amerius, let's start off with the leader, the begrudging leader of the 6 sages here in Light. All of these rulers, except for 0, have a judgment cost of double their base color and 1 void, so we're not going to review that again later. They all have essentially 3 perks to them. They have a Start the Game with Me perk, some kind of Impact to Judgment or J-Rulers perk, and some kind of Tap ability. All of them have this. So for Amerius, her Start the Game with Me perk is that if your starting life, when you set it, you add 3k, so your starting life is 7,000 for normal games. She removes the void cost of doing Judgment, or pay 1 void less to do Judgment, so in the sense for the 6 sages, removing it. And then her tap effect is target J/Resonator gains +2/+2 until end of turn. I am going to very quickly just go straight to the backside because we got a lot to cover tonight. So we'll talk about Amerius as a whole. On her J-Ruler side, she is a 6/8 with flying, and on enter, she can put target light non-chant card or light alternative card with its non-chant part from your graveyard into the field. Essentially, she can grab any light entity in your graveyard, including the Resonator half of an alternative card. And then she has pay 1 white, J/Resonators you control gain +2/+2 until the end of turn. I talked a lot. Mike, what are your thoughts on Amerius?
Amerius is one of the weird ones. She's like, you immediately see the extra 3,000 life, and you're like, control deck. And it's like, yeah, obviously you're going to see control deck, but you also see the pay less for judgment, which means that you can think of like a mid-range tempo kind of J-Ruler hard-hitting deck. People have been talking about the idea of judgmenting the Milest on 1, which obviously will... Okay. that was weird. Judgment milestone 1. I don't know what happened there.
It's all good.
Cut out for a second.
You're back.
You're good.
But also, she's lost my train of thought there. Ruined my day. She easily has one of the worst of the tap abilities, but you pick some, you lose some, whatever.
Yeah.
This is actually kind of interesting because she's going to look really similar to Reflect Refrain when you compare her to another ruler later on. But I think one of the coolest things is that she is one of the first enter abilities other than something like Genesis Creation that can grab an addition from Grave.
Yep, for sure.
Which is really neat, and I kind of like that concept. I like the fact that you can grab the...
Cough, final stance. Cough, that's what everyone's talking about.
Yep.
Is flip Amerius, take another turn. I also, I mean, like you said, there's, like, I can see her as a control deck, I can see her as a mid-range deck, and you can see her as a go-wide white deck. Like,
because she also has the board buff.
Because of the board buff, right? And so, like, not only are we talking about the customization because of the combos, right? But also, like, she herself is so, like, you can play her in so many different ways. The life point thing, for me, we don't have enough stuff that utilizes your life as a resource that makes me see that as, like, a natural advantage.
Hey, you can use the
sword, I guess.
Sword.
But
the secret dance in the moonlight too.
For me, this is kind of just like a, oh hey, aggro's getting a little too out of hand. Let's give aggro something to have to deal with. That's more where I see her life total at, because technically, life doesn't matter until you're dead. So, like, and if you're already ahead of your opponent, your life total can be lower than your opponent's and you don't care because you're already ahead. And so someone brought up the idea of, like, oh, well, that extra life can give you, like, one more top deck. Please see previous Teacher's Lounge video about banking on a top deck to bring you back into a game not being a good mindset. If you needed that extra life to get one more top deck to maybe win a game, you probably weren't winning the game anyway. So I just think it's a good idea to not get into that mindset because of life total. That being said, we have aggro decks that can burst out a crap ton of damage in 2 turns. So sometimes having a little bit of breather to go, like, okay, are you done? Now I can stabilize will be nice, I think.
Yep.
I mean, the idea that Lilius that can OTK you on turn 2?
Yeah.
With the Shrine?
Yeah.
You essentially take 10 damage if you play Amerius.
Yep.
Sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah.
And Lilius was kind of getting out of control anyway, so I'm okay seeing this sort of ruler in the game. And
she's going to add a little bit of,
her
like,
stat line is a 6'8". She's not very big, so when you're flipping her, you're doing it to sort of bring your strategy together rather than flipping her to win the game. You know what I mean?
She's a win con. She's a win con because of the pump, but she's not a win con because she entered. At least that we can tell. Obviously, we have so many, like, we don't know any of the set. We just know the rulers, but that's kind of my initial thoughts too, Paul. For sure. I'm looking at things in the chat. People are talking about they're her favorite. Protection from... Okay, yeah, okay. No other real comments. No, I'm not telling you anything. You can't know anything. I don't know. But I will tell you what the next ruler is. We'll go to the next ruler.
Yeah.
We'll go to 0. Because I think we covered Amerius pretty well there.
Yeah.
0, our apprentice sage. Like we said, she's the only one who has judgment cost for 1 white, but she has the extra restriction of you can't do judgment with her unless your other ruler is astral. This is the most unfortunate ruler for if you want to split a box with a friend and each play 1 ruler to try the game out. However, I've already fixed that for you. Congratulations. Here's the way that you can do that as a friendly thing. Is you just remove that line of text and make her judgment cost the same as Amerius for your friendly game. Make it a 3-cost judgment, remove that line of text, ta-da, she's immediately playable for the experience of trying the game out with a friend, and you each have 1 ruler. We solved it. We're done. That
Look at Jeremy with those functional erratas.
Her beginning of the game thing is that you put 4 +1/+1 counters on each ruler you control, so herself and the opponent, and her partner, and the opponent. Her partner Jade ruler gains barrier, and you can tap to put 2 +1/+1 counters on herself. She probably has the weakest tap ability because it's so pigeonholed. But you'll see why she wants those in a second. Because when she flips, she's an 8/8 with barrier that on enter destroys all other J/resonators. Vengeance board wipe for 1 on a giant body with barrier.
So at minimum, she's a 12/12.
Yes, at minimum a 12/12. Yes.
Which is pretty good.
She, to me, like, she's so much more pigeonholed than I think any of the 6-stage rulers.
Yep.
Like, her front side really doesn't matter. You want her to be able to pay 1 and board wipe as a revenge, right? Like, yes, the giving barrier is good, but if you think about it this way, it's kind of a detriment, right? You're giving your partner J ruler barrier, right? Which is good. Don't get me wrong, that's great. We've already talked about how barrier on J rulers with like Altusing Secret Hideout has been bonkers. But like, you want your partner to die. So that you can flip. So that you can flip.
You have to bank on something killing it. Because you can't like flip 0 and kill the other thing because you can't do the
because the way that it's been ruled is that with this game now, unlike Epic Stories, you can control more than one J ruler at a time. So you can't like kill your other J ruler to flip out. You know, like you either have to kill your J ruler yourself, which feels really weird, or bank on or trade it up into something, or bank on your opponent killing it with battle damage, which is surprisingly, now that I'm thinking about it, like weird. Like that's going to be weird.
Yep.
I guess the way I'm looking at this is if your initial J ruler has barrier, your opponent has to do so much work to just get rid of it, and then they get punished for killing it.
Oh yeah.
So they have to have something in the wings to prevent their board from getting wiped if they're going to spend that many resources to kill your initial J ruler.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So like I kind of get like the mechanic behind it, and I can see like the control-y elements to it as well. 0 is definitely that late game punish.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
The only thing that I could think at this point would be I don't think the game's slow enough for us to get to that late game punish, and I think the game's just way too fast for 0 at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, like obviously with the, we'll have to see what the suite for this entire set is. Maybe this set is gonna continue to succeed in that slowing us down, right? We've been having this conversation of all of Alice Origins Cluster, except for Alice 3, and Saga Cluster really does feel like we've been on this like subtle decline of like reshaping and putting power back into like a reasonable limits.
Alice 3?
Stop. You know why? Stop it. Like the card Rhea exists. The card Sigurd exists. The card Rezard exists. Like
the card Last Secret Sword exists.
The card Last Secret Sword exists. Whoops, we messed up. But if AO3 is the anomaly, right? Then we could consider that they've been continuing this trend of like trying to re-hone in on what the proper tempo and speed and pace of this game is. Which is great. And so I think that if that continues, 0 could definitely see a lot more play in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on this lady?
Not yet.
We lost Mike, and my face is now split in half.
I guess that's what he thinks.
Yep. He just wanted to leave.
Welcome back, Mike.
I'm allowed to think.
Yeah. Yeah, people chump block with the first ruler. Yep, certainly.
Chump blocking with your ruler. Oh.
I mean, I guess, right?
No.
That's where we're at.
Right. Yeah, that's where we're at.
It makes me upset.
Yeah, for sure. There's certainly I think they designed her very, very well to be like you invested a lot, or I found a way to really maximize the use out of my ruler, the flip to J ruler. Now that that's done, here's a punish. Which to me feels very nice. I like that a lot.
I feel like that's going to be the main game plan with like a Moonstart deck, because Moonstart's going to get really big with the high hand size. Endless Purse exists to get you more hand size. It's going to keep going. Eventually, it's going to get big enough for your opponent has to answer it. Once they do, 0 is the answer at that point. But that's also banking on the fact that blue-white's not a meme.
Yeah.
And, force of will. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Just give us a card that allows us to throw our ruler at the opponent's life.
You can just eat your opponent's deck. Easy.
That's how you win.
Okay, moving on to speaking of, we'll go to my list first. Because he's a handsome boy and deserves all of our love.
He's Bondo.
No, he's hot.
So, back to the regular judgment cost. His start the game with me effect is at the beginning of the main phase of your first turn. Produce 1 red. He gives his partner swiftness, and his tap effect is deal 200 damage to target player and or J/Resonator. And or on the backside, he looking real mad. He is a 0/7. Here I'll adjust this real quick so you can see a little bit better. He is a 0/7 with swiftness naturally. Who on enter deals damage equal to its attack to each J/Resonator your opponent controls. So it's a non-targeted board wipe of burn damage, and he gains 300 attack for every card in your hand. I honestly think my favorite part about him is his enter effect.
Yeah.
Like the
people talking about his about him being able to be cast on turn 1 and then you just miss out on an enter effect.
Yeah, no, that to me is like, yeah, people have been talking like, oh, I just cast my list on turn 1 and hit your opponent for 16, 18 if you're playing 0, 18 to, well, you can't. It literally has to be Amerius. If you want to do it turn 1 on the play. Hit your opponent for 15 damage on turn 1. Okay, don't do that.
It's a bad play.
Don't do that. Like I hear their point in the fact of like, because they're on your ruler, like you can just choose to not do that, right? Like you don't have to do that, and so maybe having the option. But like also, why would you do that? Like,
yeah, instead of doing a good play,
right? That's just my first thoughts.
Why would you do that instead of just doing the Lilius OTK with my list?
Yeah. And then crying because your opponent's on, and then crying because your opponent's on Amerius, and you didn't kill them, and you spent your whole hand and didn't kill them.
So are you saying then that my list is probably like a mid-range or a control ruler then?
I don't think he's controlling. I think he's a combo ruler, or I think he's an aggro finisher. Like he's an aggro, like I've been curving out with aggro. I need to push through that last bit of damage. I'm gonna burn your board and push through your face. Right.
I also really like how they basically kind of like paired him with Moonstart, which we're gonna see in a second. Despite red blue being almost as big a meme as blue white in Force Will's history.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny to me.
Sure.
Honestly, I'm pretty happy about that.
I think it's very cool. I will say one other thing that has me completely like against this like hyper. One, don't miss out on enter effects. Especially not on a J ruler, please don't. Second, there are 2 cards that are present, that exist, that will be around for at least the rest of this year, that will see very comfortable main deck play in a bunch of different decks that completely make that play worthless, and that's Mage Jack and Shadow X. Just don't. Because let's talk through Shadow X, a dark card in a format where some of the best decks are dark.
You mean all the best decks are dark?
Right. So you flip, you don't burn anything, you swing in. Cool, you've wasted your burn. I'm gonna flash in Shadow X. I'm gonna burn you for 4 life, then I'm gonna block it with Bane and it's dead. Great. It's a good plan, we did it. Then Mage Jack, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna whiff on it. I'm going to flash in a Mage Jack, gain 4 life, so now I'm at higher life than I was when I started. Then I'm going to block my list, still not going to take any damage, and I'm going to gain another 4 life. So not only did you waste one of your best enter effects, but I'm either up 8 life, or you're down a J ruler and I haven't lost any life. Like, please don't. Steven, I know that they're not being played right now. What I'm saying is, if this is something that people try to gravitate towards, there are 2 very splashable answers that you will get punished by. Please don't do it. Like, don't.
Also, I like
And
all the J-Roller hate cards we have in the game. Those are really nice.
Yeah. Let's move on to Moonstart here. The other pair of the lovers. So Moonstart, she has, if you would draw a starting hand, you draw that starting hand +1, and your maximum hand size is increased by 1 until the end of the game instead. So starting hand size is 6, permanent max hand size is 8. Whenever you do Judgment of a Ruler, you draw a card, and her tap effect is draw a card, put a card from your hand on the top, from your hand on the bottom of your deck.
It's Reflect.
So yeah, tap reflectability. And then her flip side is a 0/7 as well. 300 for each card in your hand with flying, and whenever she deals damage to your opponent, you draw a card. One thing that I do want to note is in talking with the other judges, as far as we can tell, Moonstart will not see herself do Judgment to draw you a card. Because it's whenever you whenever you do Judgment, and doing Judgment is like the ruler hitting the field, or the J ruler like hitting the field.
It's not like declaring Judgment process.
It's not.
You draw
Yeah,
the card.
exactly.
So
you
should have worded it to when a J ruler enters the field, draw a card.
But that also would have stopped it. She wouldn't have drawn it either way.
Exactly.
It would have been like when you like put Judgment enters the chase, draw a card. But that's bad wording, and don't do that either.
That's terrible wording.
Overall, overall thoughts on Moonstart first. I'll save my thoughts for last.
She's easily the worst of the J ruler side so far.
I agree.
Just big attack and draw cards when deal damage is like Grim Cluster era card text that I would like think to see. This reminds me of like Julius Caesar from like Vingolf 1 in terms of its, J ruler side's effectiveness. The front side though is interesting. It's just like a shitload of draw cards. It's just like you get draws, you get sculpting, you get whatever you want. Reflect is very good at that point, but I think the game has gotten to a point where just generally you don't want to see like a utility card like this that often. Reflect was really good when the card quality was just all that mattered. Now it's all synergy picks, so Reflect barely sees play in the Eternal formats. I feel like Moonstart's going to follow suit essentially with how the structure of the game is formatted currently. That being said, I could have my foot in my entire mouth, and we could see some crazy combo come out that requires tap, draw a card, put a card on the bottom of the deck.
Yeah, for sure. I think that if tap, draw a card, put a card back on top of the deck, it actually would make it more playable. Because we have cards like Wind of the Star that are 2-cost cancels are good, right? Like we can assume that, and we'll talk about 2-cost cancels here in a little bit. But 2-cost cancels are good. The problem with Wind of the Star is it's incredibly varied. But like the idea of that, if you could use Moonstart to put like a dual, like a multi-card, an alternative card, draw a card, put an alternative card that you want to have in hand for the next turn but don't need it right now on the top of your deck, so that you have like a high-cost cancel to flip off of Wind of the Star, like that would be really good for like a control deck where you're drawing a lot of cards. Putting it on the bottom is meh. But it could be that literally, as far as we can tell right now, the biggest weight of Moonstart is having an extra card in your starting hand.
Yeah. You have to have singletons in order to do that. Moonstart just kind of does it for free.
Yeah. And the fact that it increases your maximum hand size. IU didn't increase your maximum hand size. Like,
it's a little bit of a moot point when Endless Purse exists, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Fair. Yeah. But starting with it is nice.
Oh yeah.
It's not too bad.
Oh, overall, I think you go ahead, Paul.
I think Moonstart is a good, solid ruler for a control deck that wants to get its huge hand, flip her, protect her, and then swing. That being said, is the format too fast? And it probably is, which is why, like, that's what Mike is kind of alluding to. At least that's how I interpreted it. The format's just a little bit too fast, and there is just a little bit too much J-Ruler hate right now to not pair her with something like Zero.
Yep.
Right.
To give her natural protection. So,
and at that point in time, you're not even benefiting from her perform a judgment draw card, because Zero can't Judgment into its own Moonstarts after already dead.
Right.
So
So
blue-white's still a meme.
She's more of the utility ruler. Like, she's not there to Judgment. She's there to make sure that you have like some sort of support for your other ruler that you want to use. But she's not meant to Judgment, which I think is okay.
I would very much categorize most of these 6 sages into 2 categories, where it's like very much a support. Like they are the second Judgment. They are there to facilitate your main deck engine, and like they are there to facilitate the consistency of your deck. And then there are other rulers that are like the bomb side, right? Like Amerius is very clearly the bomb side. Like she's a big, like she is going to put in work to win you the game on somehow by herself, right? My list is the same way. Like he is going to facilitate you winning the game by himself in some way. Like the flip, either it's through his swiftness damage or the board wipe burn or something, right? Zero is, I would say, she's kind of like in the middle ground. She's like being the apprentice, she's kind of like halfway between both, where she's like a utility ruler to buff up the other one, but also can be a kill you kind of thing. And then Moonstart is very much a, hey, I'm just here to make sure the deck works. Like I just want to make sure the deck works. Please don't flip me. I don't want to. Please don't.
Keep me off the field. Thanks.
Yeah. Which I think is fine. And again, if they were all just bonkers on the front and back, or they were all just like, oh yeah, I flipped this and I'm trying to win, I think that would be boring. So I like the fact that there's that variety of like the feel between them, which is nice.
Sure, because that squirrel big.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a deck to work with. Give it swiftness, hit face with the big squirrel.
There you go.
Squirrel control.
Moonstart squirrels.
Sounds good. Let's talk about, do we want to talk about the old man or the young elf next?
Well, Grisballista is next on my list. Let's talk about him.
Okay, Grisballista, the old man. He's not old. He's
young in this one.
He's just Grisballista. So, his start the game with me effect is that your first stone call is actually searching your stone deck for whatever stone you want and putting it into play. So good old Sherry 1, which has always been a good effect. So that's great.
Yep.
His benefit isn't a Jade Ruler benefit, but it's whenever a magic stone is put into the field by the call of a J/ruler you control. So tapping a ruler to call a stone. Not an effect that puts a stone into play. Calling a stone. Very important distinction. It gains tap, produce moon, or will of any attribute until the end of the turn. So the turn a stone enters, via your ruler calling it, it's an infinite stone. It produces whatever color you want or moon.
Doesn't produce time though.
Doesn't produce time. Good. And then his tap effect is banish a magic stone, put the top card of your magic stone deck into the field, rested. Which is good. We're learning. Stones need to come into play rested if you're cheating them in. Good, Force of Will. Thank you. Not Griffin. His flip side, the lamest of the second arts, we just got a little bit of a lens flare and a polishing of the stone. Poor Grisballista, he tried so hard. 7/7, who gains +2/+2 for every different name among all magic stones you control, so minimum 9/9. So technically the biggest base stat of any 6th Age. He gains Eternal as long as you control 5 or more magic stones with different names, and magic stones you control gain tap, produce 1 will of any attribute or moon. So all your stones become perfect stones when he flips. I adore this card.
I do too.
From a design point, I absolutely adore it.
Let me tell you one thing I'm definitely going to be building in Conqueror for the next OLS where this is going to be available. Resonance Grisballista control. I want to do some dumb stuff.
Ooh.
Well, I'm
going to play that 3-drop Abdul, and I'm going to put cheat a stone into play, and I'm going to make them discard a card, and I'm going to do it again.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. Yeah.
Oof.
Paul, I want to hear your thoughts while I'm still trying to get over the fact that I love this card.
Well, don't get over it. Please don't. I think this card is amazing. I think it's a little odd that we still have stones control, like that kind of idea of using your stones and putting them into play, not in white or green. Like, it's interesting that it's still in black. I mean, I get that it's Guru Lessa and he's the Magic Stone guy, but I still find that mechanic really interesting to be putting in black. So that's a little bit of a confusion for me.
It's very reminiscent of like that LEL Black Green Bruce Ballesta, one of my favorite cards of all time.
Yeah.
Which just like, I love that card. I love that you can kind of eke that same kind of feeling out of this one. It's very flavorful to Bruce Ballesta's origins, past, stuff that he does.
It also
the precedent is very much there.
Yeah,
it's still just odd to me that we're still in that space. So
sure.
I'm gonna get over it though, because the idea that you just flip this guy and everything is what is it? That pain stone that like you take 200 if you produce anything that's not moon.
Yeah,
Moonshade.
Moonshade.
Yeah, everything's Moonshade now. Have fun. Like that idea. I mean, he's not even a black ruler at that point. He literally is just whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, I think his color is more that like we needed a sage for each color, and Group Celeste has been black before, so make it black.
Yeah,
because he can be whatever you want him to be. Especially considering like it's very clear. I think he's also the ruler that we can most guess his support suite before even seeing any of his cards. Like, very clearly his support suite is going to be based on having stones of different attributes or different names, which I think is cool in two ways, because
God, if they brought back the resonance trigger, I'd be so hyped.
Please no. Resonance like stealth was a bad decision in terms of how it was implemented. But I will say that Grubalesta is very interesting because he, much in the same way that Zero is like kind of a support, kind of a bomb, Grubalesta is just like, no, which one you want me to be? I can do it. Like, you can very much build him to be the support ruler for your deck, where like Grubalesta's whole point is making sure that my deck's my like crazy multicolored deck's stone situation is not a problem. Like, that's Bruce Ballesta's job. That's what Bruce Ballesta is going to do. But then you can also, based on his support suite and how competitive that is, Bruce Ballesta can be your main go-to guy. And like, no. Bruce Ballesta is going to put in work when he flips. You know, which I think is very, again, every one of these rulers feels so different, and I love it so much.
If we've learned anything from like Celesta, Eternal on a J ruler is really nutty.
Yes, absolutely. And like, sure, he's not as big as Celesta, but like, there literally is nothing in the format that you can do to touch stones. So like, he's like, okay, cool, I'm a 17/17 Eternal. Like, that's not nothing. Yeah, that's Oof. Hold on.
Stock.
Furnace Flyer, you know what? I tell you what, I bet Bruce Ballesta would hold on to your GME stock for you if you want.
No, like, I don't know. Bruce Balesta's kind of a boomer. He'd probably tell you to sell.
No, I think overall, there's so much about this guy that I'm so excited for, both his J ruler side and the possibilities that he opens up on his ruler side, even post rotation. Like, even post rotation, this makes me feel comfortable. Like, let's say that next cluster, whatever it is, they decide to do away with the dual stones, right? The Ataroctius, that means we lose Ataroctius Memoria. Great. But that means, you know, based on what we get, like, dual color decks, multicolor decks might feel very, very awkward. Triple color decks might feel even like impossible to do. So then Bruce Ballesta is like, no, I got you. It's okay. I got you. Don't worry about it. But it's not like, it's also really well designed in the fact that it's not permanent, right? Like, he makes your curve good, but he doesn't like make you perfect for the whole game, which I think is a really good design wise. I love it.
Yeah,
love it so much.
Bruce Ballesta, good boy.
Bruce Ballesta's good boy. So now let's talk about the one that everyone's kind of freaking out about for a lot of different reasons, which is actually interesting to see the conversation go in so many different ways. Everybody's favorite little elf chick, Feasting. We have Lolly Feasting this time around, apparently. So Sorry. So judgments of 2 green and 1. Before the game starts, you may mulligan up to 3 times instead of once. You may do judgment anytime you could play a card with quick cast, and tap to produce 1 will only to play chance. On her flip side, she is a 5/7 with flying, so naturally by herself the weakest of the 6 sages by far in terms of stat line. On enter, you can choose up to 2. First mode is cancel target spell. Second mode is dispend all damage that would be dealt by target entity until end of turn. These are very reminiscent of enter effects or spells that Feasting has had in the past. It's not surprising to me that we see this on her enter effect. Keep in mind that it says choose up to 2. It does not say choose 1, then choose 1 again. So she cannot cancel 2 spells. I've seen people mention that. She can't do that.
Nope.
So I'm gonna go back to her front side because I think she requires the most talk about on her front side. Let's specifically talk about the idea of the triple mulligan. I have a lot of thoughts about it. I would be curious to hear your guys' thoughts before I share
I have
mine.
1, maybe 2 thoughts about it.
Sure, go for it.
First thought, this combined with my list actually makes that turn 2 Lilius OTK hyper consistent, ridiculously consistent,
Sure.
to the point where I'm actually kind of worried about it. Because the thing with Lilius is that you couldn't guarantee it was happening because you have to assemble Thunder, Last Sword, Shrine in order to get there, and your opponent had to have nothing to stop that. With this, it's Miles gives you the extra fire on turn 1, which means that if they cancel a shrine, you can have 2 shrines because you just mulligan 3 times to back the first one up. And then next turn, you're pretty much guaranteeing yourself the OTK. And if you're facing Amerius, you're like, all right, cool, I'll change plans. Let me just not mulligan for the combo. Let me mulligan for the control strategy. And then you're playing red-green mid-range against a 7,000 life deck that you're just going to steamroll because you're playing a big boy. So that's one of my first fears in terms of that. The second fear is that exact ruler combination in Wanderer giving you turn 1 Umar OTK.
To be perfectly honest, I've already heard through the channels that it is a 99% possibility that Uber is finally going to get the axe in Wanderer.
Imagine that. Imagine Dennis finally being like, oh, maybe
can't confirm, so I'm not going to say 100%, but everything that I'm hearing is that it's very likely to happen now.
It's you gotta future-proof that in your format or something. I don't know.
Paul, what about your thoughts on the mulligan part? We're taking her very step by step because I think there's a lot to unpack with her.
I think it's so tempting to play Feasting over any of the other rulers at this point. And the question that my head is thinking about is, okay, what ruler do I pair with Feasting for the best value?
Sure.
Because at this point, like Mike said, I can assemble my combo like that. More than likely, because I'm saying about half of my deck. And then if anything tries to interrupt me, I can just say, yeah, no. I just flip my Feasting and I say no to whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So the idea that Feasting is the combo enabler ruler is interesting to me in a game that hasn't had combo decks in quite a while.
Yeah, no, that for me is my first thought about looking at Feasting is that combo decks are very much comfortable again. One, triple mulligan to be able to find your combo pieces when you're digging that way, and built-in protection that can't be discarded and probably can't be countered. That's something that combo decks in Force of Will have never really had. So enabling that deck construction space makes me very excited. That's very cool. Before I go into my next thought is Thomas, we've already talked about how you should never do a turn 1 Milas flip with Amerius, in the fact that your opponent, if they have Mage Jack or Shadow X, which will see more play the more that deck gets played, will not be good. Don't do it. So my other thought with Feasting outside of a combo deck is, and this might be a hot take, and I'm perfectly comfortable being chewed out in the chat for it, is that by itself, a triple mulligan is not advantage. It's consistency. But you could get the perfect hand after 3 mulligans, and your opponent had the perfect hand after 1. not playing Feasting. Okay, so we're still playing the same game, right? A triple mulligan by itself is not actually generating you advantage. It's massive boost to consistency, but like that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to come on top of your opponent. It's going to give you a really good chance. It's going to boost that chance. Like, I'm not denying that. But at the same time, like, you have to recognize that your opponent also gets to mulligan and could also have a really good hand. So like mulligan doesn't mean that you're winning. Secondly,
I think the biggest thing about her, honestly, I feel like it's going to go into like your point that you're going to go into, but I think that the biggest thing about her is that extra produce 1 to spend will on chance. You have to evaluate every chant with void cost in it so differently.
Yes, that too for sure. That's if it's, optical camouflage is now free.
Yeah.
That's a thing. Oh yeah, I also didn't think about Black Moonray against my list. Isn't that's why Rezard's so good is because of his consistency? No, Rezard's good because what he does consistently is so good. That's different. Like the things that Rezard is doing using his consistency are still very good and hard to interrupt. Consistency is not the problem with Rezard. It's what he's doing with that consistency that's the problem.
And how hard it is to stop it.
That's the problem. Consistency by itself is not the problem. Hot take. Feel free to call me wrong. I'm totally fine if you...
This game has 40 cards, a 5-card mulligan, and you get to sculpt it how you want. Consistency is everywhere in this game. Consistency doesn't matter as much in this game as it does in something like Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh!
Right. So, the thing about, to me, is a 3-cost cancel on a body to be able to naturally have it. Let's assume that you're not playing Amerius, right? So a 3-cost cancel on a body is the constant threat of a cancel is good. But it does cost 3, right?
Yep.
So like that is something to think about, is the fact that it does cost 3 if you're not playing Amerius, and 3 can be a lot to spend on, as we've talked about before. 3 in the meta that we're in, 3 to cancel a card that maybe costs 1 or 2 isn't always that great.
It's bad.
So like I will never say that Feasting is a bad ruler. That will never be said by me. This is a very good ruler. I think that she is not. I think that her advantage is that she's a ruler. Like, all of these effects are good, and if done correctly at the right time and capitalized on, are great. But the thing that I think makes Feasting the best is that, or Feasting so good, is that none of it can be discarded.
Yep.
Although
I will say, I think one thing, somewhat counterpoint, I think that she's amazing because she's a ruler and can't be discarded, but I think she's limited because she's a ruler.
Yes.
And I'll put the hot take out here that people probably will consider her in a similar vein to Kaguya from DBV. 2-cost, cancel a spell, put a body on board. But Kaguya was good because if you had multiple of her, you stole all the tempo and you won the game.
Yeah, and also, yeah, right, exactly. You get to use her once, right? She is like a defensive silver bullet or a combo protector. Thomas, what you're talking about, you really want the consistency from this with 1 or 2 types of decks, combo decks and decks with silver bullets. Absolutely. Like feasting shines in those scenarios. Absolutely. Those types of decks, however, do have weaknesses that currently exist in the meta. So like I think that's even before we see any of her support suite. Like a cancel on a body for 3 is great. But really, even when Kaguya cost 3, did it see play? Like, outside of a deck that could get it to 2? Not a lot. And so, like, you have to be considerate of the fact that you have this, like, one-time cancel. Now, what comes out in the set could completely change my mind about how good Feasting is. Like, Feasting's support suite, the green support suite, could be so far and above beyond the cancel everything, stop your opponent, that like having one more cancel is like all that you need to put the nail in the coffin in your opponent. It's done. It's over. Absolutely possible. In first response, I would put her as like my second highest of the 6 sages. I think my like initial reaction about like gut check all around like breakdown, and I'd be interested to hear what you guys have with in the chat. Like I'd be very interested to hear what your breakdown is. Like knee jerk reaction with the rulers. I think it goes Amerius, Feasting, it's probably a tie between Gruspalesta and my list, Zero and Moonstart.
I definitely have Milgus at the top, and then Feasting below him at this point. But Amerius is third, Gruspalesta fourth, and then Zero, Moonstart. That's my opinion, at least right now.
Yeah. Paul, what about you?
Pre-support.
I say Moonstart's at the bottom.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As far as my number 1 spot, I don't know if Amerius is definitely number 1. I'd say I'd probably agree more that she's number 3.
Sure.
So I would say maybe Feasting 2 for sure.
Yeah.
This is not going in order.
No, it's fine. It's fine. You put it however order you want. You're naming it for sure.
I think just because I know how much stone ramping is important in this game, and how like stone consistency is much more important than actual deck consistency, I would actually put Grubalist a little bit higher.
Oh, okay.
On this list. I'd probably put him like probably above Amerius, because even though you can like summon something with Amerius from your grave, and that's okay, but it depends on what you're grabbing, right? And right now I'm thinking of a couple of cards in my head: Final Stance, Nidhogg. I'll have to look at the white suite again.
Yeah,
Nidhogg.
Chug.
There are some things you can do with Amerius, but she kind of feels like a Boruzuki in that way, where she's like, she can do some really awesome things, but how impactful will she actually be by getting stuff back from the grave?
Yeah, for sure.
I think Grubalista is a little bit higher.
She's also in Amerius is also in white, which might not necessarily lend itself very well to protecting its graveyard when we have cards that she does target. So she's not like Rezard. So like, you know, I can see your point
anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. No, I see that for sure. To talk to Chug in the chat, Chug that Estes. What about you? Use Feasting with Zero. That's probably like the easiest like go-to combination of like Feasting plus Zero. You are always threatening Feasting to be able to cancel, prevent the damage from something, chump block. Feasting dies. She's done her work for the turn. She's dead, and now you're sitting on this one. Oh, she'll probably trade into something, right? Because she'll actually be a 9/11. If you're playing it with Zero, which is pretty good. But then she costs 3, right? So you're paying 3. And then you have this like quick cast 1-drop 0 that you're like always threatening your opponent with. Like that's a good combination and certainly a way that you can play her. But it's like, you know, the more that you think about feasting outside of a combo deck, the more you start to think of feasting that way. And in my mind, that's like, yeah, okay, that's fine.
That's probably the second priority, I would say, when you're looking at Feasting's ruler side.
Right, exactly. Which again, I think we can all agree, knocking out of the park, that all of these rulers, even in thinking about it, can be played so many different ways. Before we even see the set itself, we're just
one of the coolest things with her is the fact that like her quick cast judgment doesn't just apply to herself.
Yeah, it applies to her partner too.
Like you have to think differently about some of these rules. Like it makes me think differently about Moonstart. I still think she's the worst, but doesn't mean that I think that having like her judgment available with 3 stones open at the end of the turn, draw a card, swing, draw a card. There's a lot that goes on there.
Yeah, for sure. Lots of cool stuff. So we do have time, so we're gonna go ahead and talk about. I do like the fact that our like current ordering is close but not perfect from each other, which is nice. So we're gonna talk about our good buddy Wolfgang. He was spoiled today. We're not gonna talk about the individual Cthulhu's just because we don't have time. But I do want to point out real quick for those of you who probably weren't paying attention. Azathoth is your Buy-a-Box ruler or Buy-a-Box promo. This artwork is way different than the promo Azathoth. And Nyarlathotep is your pre-release promo, and this artwork is way different than the pre-release promo artwork. So we finally got different artworks for promos. How much is that going to continue? Who knows? But it's a thing. So just hooray. So let's talk about Wolfgang. Wolfgang is once again filling in our slot of the non-judgmenting J ruler, which I like. I kind of like that. Those have always been very fun, so it's kind of nice to have 2 sets back to back with them. Much in the same way that Ragnarok had a deck building restriction, Wolfgang has a restriction as well. You may only have Darkness and or Cthulhu cards in your deck. So let's talk about that real quick. Darkness means that it has to have Darkness somewhere in its casting cost and attribute. Or at casting cost or attribute, or both. That's specific because of some Wanderer cards that ignore that rule. But like, it can be a white-black card. It can't be a white card. It can be a blue-black card. It can't be a blue card. There's a lot of questions on like, does space-time count? Yes, space-time counts. Does part of true power count? Yes, part of true power counts. Like, just
Final Stance counts.
Final Stance does count. It's a darkness card. His thing is you can put a madness counter on him rather than pay an awakening cost of a Cthulhu spell you control. And at the end of turn, there's a trigger. By the way, that trigger will go off every single turn. That might
Not just on your turn.
And it also is a mandatory trigger. Just saying, that's going to create a priority sequence during every single end phase. Just know. If there are 5 or more madness counters on this card, you lose the game. One thing to note is that it only checks if you have 5. So it doesn't, and it only checks at end of turn. So if you have like 8, but you won the game, doesn't matter. Because you won the game already, and we didn't get to the end of the turn. I like this card. Like, as design space wise, deck building restriction wise, mechanic wise, flavor wise, like, knocked it out of the park for me.
Home run.
Yeah. I mean,
as far as the actual...
the last set. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
No, yeah, I was about to say with regard with like the ruler itself, the fact that we're seeing another ruler side only is really cool because it's just like it kind of it gives kind of like a callback to Ragnarok in a sense, where it's like the villain is this like high risk, high reward kind of like restriction to it, and I like that dynamic a lot because I love restrictions and I love feeling like the villain cards are fundamentally different from the hero cards. And
Yeah,
like,
that's for sure.
Oh, oozing with flavor. But I think the one thing is that a lot of what we're going to assume from Wolfgang is going to be fully tied to how these awakenings are for Cthulhu's. Because if you go back through like the annals of history, in this game's history, there are almost no Cthulhu's that have awakenings.
Yeah, it hasn't been. The theming
so it's very
of
specific to this set.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see exactly like what awakenings look like.
We've seen a couple of decent ones.
Determine
Yogg was cool.
To determine exactly, how viable he is in the competitive sense. But I agree with you. Like, he feels nothing like the other 6. And awesome. Great. Do it up. I'm about it. Also, thank you for not making it Singleton.
He might need to be if we're talking about Wanderer, because that Thuga train is going to get real dicey with Yogg.
Just kill the Yogg. They won't have swift. They won't. Oh wait, Cthulhu's naturally have swiftness.
Oops.
Can we ban Cthulhu now?
Well, we're gonna have to. That might be something happening in the near future.
The other thing too is just like visually, it's a cool card.
He just really does look like a Final Fantasy
boss.
Yeah. It's very, very cool. One thing that's we were wondering before we saw this, we've seen him before in the pre-release playmat. But one thing that we were wondering about is like, what's that giant thing behind him? Well, that giant thing behind him was actually 3 other card arts. So it's Wolfgang, Azathoth, Nyarlathotep, and Yogg-Sothoth. Were all combined their artwork together to form the pre-release playmat, which is awesome.
I really like his flavor text too. It's giving you like that kind of like all powerful like being coming to the plane of existence, but like he's like residents of the world W. I don't want to be here, but I need the power of the magic stone. It's like why? I want to know. I want to know what he's doing.
Yeah, I've said I've said before that I don't know if I can. I've said it publicly. Have I said it publicly enough? I don't know.
Probably. If you're not, you're gonna do it now.
I'm going out on a limb and I'm gonna say that I think that this is probably gonna be one of the best Force of Will sets that's ever been done. And when I say best set design, like I'm thinking like the encapsulation of design, where it's like lore, fun to play casually, creative exploratory space, viable competitively, like like that. That's like my components. So like I think if the rulers are any indication, I'm betting on it. We'll come back when we'll come back when we see all the sets, and I know that's a high bar to set. I understand, and like how much of that high bar is Jeremy's a shill, but like I'm feeling it. Yeah, that's new. That's not you can adjust your interpretation of my statement based on
that on
that.
Shirt.
I love this card. I think it's cool, and in like so many different ways, and like in looking at these 6 rulers, it feels like Lapis Cluster, like the same feel of like looking at rulers and getting excited about deck building from like the Lapis Cluster era, but like more creativity allowed.
Yep, I agree with that.
And so like Lapis Cluster is pretty commonly referred to as like the golden era, the golden age of FAO.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm down for that.
Let's just hope they don't give us another broken set 3. That's all we ask for.
Just set 3.
The infamous set 3.
Like that's the way they're constructing this cluster, right? Because I mean, if you even think as soon as last cluster, you're looking at, okay, we're building onto this interlocking pool of cards that can be retroactive, but also work with its own support. But these are like their own like little silos of support, and they have everything they need for the most part. And unless we get like obvious support for something in the, like this card is gonna break Lilius in this set, or this card is gonna break Celesta in this set, like I just don't see how this is gonna like sort of retrograde back and
so here's something very interesting that I'm gonna say. The design of these J rulers so far has made me more excited for Alice Origin to rotate out than I think any other set has made me excited for another set to rotate out. It's that good in terms of its design.
Yeah.
Because Alice Origin was just everybody knows that it was weak in terms of design standpoint, it was weak in terms of deck building standpoint. Everything was built in a linear fashion to make it easy to access. And it's fine. You're allowed to do that. It's just not interesting to me. This is interesting.
Yeah, this is super interesting to me. Yeah, for sure. I will say I'll hit this for quick. Chug that Estes. I will say that I've been noticing them that push ads on Facebook. Like I'm seeing sponsored Facebook posts for Force of Will.
I've seen sponsored Instagram posts, and they don't even have an Instagram.
Wait. Okay, that's nuts. Well, I mean, Facebook and Instagram are connected, so that makes sense.
Yeah,
but like they're dipping their toes back into the world of that. I will say also that here on the channel, they are reaching out and like understanding content creators a little bit more. This will be the 4th set in a row that we at Ruler School have received an exclusive set of spoilers to be able to talk about. I already have them, but I'm not allowed to talk about them yet.
Jeremy, you tease.
I know, right? So good. But like that's something that we've never really gotten before. Like they've never really entertained that idea. They've also sent us advanced copies of the sets the past few since the start of Alice Origins. I am pushing for this set to try to be able to unbox those live as a sneak peek. I don't know if that's going to work or not. Obviously, we'll try our best. Like I think they're trying. Could they do better? Absolutely, but like I think that we're seeing them try a little bit more than they have in the past.
They should definitely reach out to somebody in the Western world who has a marketing degree and could help them out with something. Yeah. Wonder who they could reach out to. That'd be crazy if we could figure out if there was somebody in the Force community that knows marketing.
We'll figure that out.
Some sense.
The other thing about this set to me is I did this experiment. We talked about Epic of the Dragon Lord for one ruler per box is some of the most hot and cold boxes you could you can have in recent years. Because on one hand you get Lilius or Celesta, and on the other hand, you get Mikage. Which is like the highs and lows of the boxes are very much there. I did an experiment the other day, and I'd be interested. We'll close our thoughts on this. Coming at it from the perspective of, let's talk about best box to worst box in terms of making the most use of that box for an experience. It's pretty easy to say that the worst box for making the most use of it, if you buy a single box by itself, ruler distribution wise, is Wolfgang 0, which is a 0 that has to get paired with another tag, and Wolfgang, who is the most like focused and narrowed as far as we know, because Cthulhu's only, right? And also the math checks out, assuming that all rulers have an equal pull rate, the likelihood of that exact ruler box happening is 1 out of every 21 boxes. That's pretty good.
That's sub 5%.
Yeah, that's pretty good for like the worst box possible. And even then, that's still like a pretty good box.
You
like,
can still build Wolfgang.
You can still build Wolfgang, and even from the perspective of like we talked about before, of like me and a friend both bought into the set and we're splitting a box. Cool. Use my in-house errata on 0, and then cool, you can both do it, right? Like,
or just draft the box and just use the draft ruler.
Use the draft ruler, right? Like, the worst possible hot take. The worst possible box of Magic Stone War in terms of usability, playability, and fullest engagement is still better than a box of Mikage.
Correct. Because at least you get Wolfgang.
Yeah.
And they just keep knocking it out of the park. I mean, the park keeps...
I really hope that we keep getting these kind of like mid-range looking rulers like Wolfgang, because he's very much my speed. Like, cheat out your effects early, but don't cheat out too many of them. And then once you go into the late game, pay for them up front if you feel comfortable with it. It's like, so good.
Chug that Estes. Thank you, buddy.
Chug that Estes.
Thank you very much. Glad to have you here. Glad that you were able to join us. Good luck on whatever video that you're making. That'll be fun to look at. And I think that pretty much does it for us tonight. We've covered all 6 rulers. We will get more spoilers every single day this week, so next week we will be doing another roundup of spoilers. I think let me check.
Oh.
Let me check the date on which I'm allowed to do mine.
Should be coming here with the tease.
Oh, the day before. So, our exclusive spoilers will be next Sunday. So
it's not this Sunday, but next Sunday.
No, this coming Sunday.
Oh, this coming Sunday.
Sunday, we'll be posting our spoilers. So maybe if the Svetlana tournament is still happening, we'll maybe also preview them live. We'll see. So that could be fun. But that being said, if you're as hyped as we are and you haven't pre-ordered boxes already, 1, you still have time, thankfully, because 2, there's a link in the description to Odyssey Games where you can go get boxes for $85 a pop. I've been split because Mike left this again. $85 a piece, shipping into the United States. You do have to pay for shipping this time around, but it's a pretty decent rate. And then, as well as if you're interested in participating in that tournament this weekend, you can click that link in the description to go there. Also, join us on the Ruler School Discord. We have getting like 1 to 3 new members every day, and it's been really fun being able to talk with everybody, so consider clicking that link in the description. And then lastly, if we made you laugh, if we made you smile, if we made you get angry because you disagreed with my hot takes, if you want to see the gloves come back, consider clicking that join button. It's right down below the video. As you can see,
Jeremy, eat the gloves. Bring Rizard to the tournament this week.
It's not going to happen. As you can see, we're trying to get to our next milestone goal is 100 members. We are trying to get to 150 members by the end of 2021. So the 100 is a good place to start and gets us our next emote, which is Lumia. So we'd be very happy if you would consider joining that. It's like a Twitch subscription, although YouTube pays better and it gets you access to emotes and all other kinds of fun stuff. So again, if you like what we do, click that subscribe button either way. So you know that when we're going live. But if you want to support us, consider clicking that join button too. We'd be glad to have you be here. The tournament is New Frontiers, so just so you know. That being said, though, that is going to be it for tonight. So until next time, I am DMO73, and I have been joined by the magnificent Mike.
That's me.
And the perfect Paul.
Aww.
And we'll see you all next time. So until then, class dismissed.